Hello and welcome to Week Slam with your host, Sam, where the goal of my channel is to try out a new hobby, interest, or activity for 1 week straight and give you guys the progress update about what you can learn in 5 days. This week's Slam is off-road rollerblading.
To properly understand how off-road rollerblading came about, we have to go back to the creation of regular rollerblades. Contrary to popular belief, the idea of rollerblading came before quad skates. This is shown in the early 1700s when an unknown Dutch inventor felt like going ice skating in the summer by attaching wooden spools to a piece of wood, then connecting them to his shoes and calling them skeelers, creating the first recorded pair of rollerblades. Quad skates, on the other hand, weren't invented until nearly half a century later when a man named John Joseph Merlin literally crashed a London masquerade party by wearing his newly invented metal wheel boots straight into the ballroom's giant mirror. Throughout the years, roller skates made a few appearances, such as with the German ballet in 1818 to substitute as ice skates on stage, and around 1840 at a beer hall in Berlin where barmaids would deliver drinks to the patrons while on wheels, but for the most part was unavailable to the public. It wasn't until 1863 when an American inventor named James Plimpton attached 4 wheels connected via rubber springs, creating an early version of modern-day skates. Plimpton took his skates and converted the showroom of his New York furniture shop to a rink, finally making skating available to the public. By the time the 1950s rolled around, skating had become a national pastime and was popular among all generations. Many diners and drive-in restaurants started getting their employees to deliver food on skates, and is still seen at Sonic to this day. The next uptick of skating was in the 70s and 80s when thousands of roller discos opened up around the country for an army of bell-bottom and puffy-haired people. It wasn't until 1983 when brothers Scott and Brennan Olsen wanted to practice ice hockey in the off-season that they created their very own inline skate and started the company Rollerblade. These new rollerblades were very popular with both hockey players and skaters alike, causing the industry to develop and grow. In the year 1997, the rollerblade company made the leap from pavement to off-road with the invention of the Coyote, the world's first off-road skates. Fast forward to today, and there's many different types of off-roading skates, such as the long-distance Nordic skates, all the way to the SUV style that's made for downhill slopes and BMX trails. This week, I'll be trying to master the Powerslide Outback SUV skates.
If we've ever met, you'll probably know that I'm a huge fan of rollerblading, which is why this episode is so special to me. After skating for around 5 years, this week I finally get to try out off-road rollerblades.
We have made it to the park. We got the boots on. Let's do some off-road rollerblading.
The first day of trying them was actually exhausting. Granted, it was more than likely because I wasn't used to skating them and that I had the tire pressure way too low, which I fixed the next day. Something I noticed early on is that these skates have a lot more traction on the ground and don't roll as far on pavement, but compensate by being able to go off-road. Another thing I noticed was that my wheels would sometimes slant to the side, which can be fixed by tightening the boots and working on your form. Today, I explored a local park with a small BMX path and was even able to go down a few hills.
All right, we have made it to day 2. Let's do some rollerblading.
On day 2, I took the skates out on the levee and successfully made it down some hills. This day, I contacted the company to see what tire pressure they recommended running the skates at, which was about 40 psi above what I was using the previous day. So after topping them off, they ran a lot smoother. Something I noticed of these skates is that you won't even feel things like gravel, cracks in the sidewalk, or puddles of water, which can all be fatal on regular skates. The shock absorption is phenomenal off-road as well. While going through the grass, I hit a few holes and was able to keep rolling with no problem. Today, I even took the skates down an abandoned trail that led right into the river.
We are back on day number 3. Today's trail has almost no paved roads, so let's see how it goes.
And I wasn't kidding. Other than that sidewalk, there wasn't a single foot of pavement down the whole trail. On day 3, I started to realize that the skates are completely functional off-road, but are optimized on certain types of terrain. For example, this trail consisted of mostly loose gravel which was skatable, but made it difficult to gain traction. What I mean is that the skates would roll fine, however, when you'd push, they would slip on the rocks, making you have to catch yourself after each step. Towards the end of the trail, there was a section that had dirt instead of gravel, and the skates worked amazing there. Another useful tip is that if you're ever on a small trail without a lot of room on either side, use the scooter push to get by, which also helped on the loose gravel.
We're out here on day 4. Let's hit the trails.
The trails on day 4 were surprisingly tough for a few reasons. The first being that it was mostly flatlands without any hills. If you're going to be off-road skating, remember that the more hills you find, the less work you'll have to do. This trail also had a good bit of muddy parts which can really slow you down, in addition to being full of tree roots. Depending on the size, these roots can knock you to the ground if you're not careful. There were a few parts where the path got pretty small, so I had to ride scooter to keep going or else I'd lose traction in the grass. Towards the end of the trail, I actually found a big old turtle walking by and stopped by to say hi.
Alright guys, we made it to day 5, and today we're out here on the Comeet River bike path, and we're about to hit some serious hills. Let's go.
And those hills were no joke. On the final day, I realized that the performance of your skates heavily depends on where you're skating. For example, certain parts of the trail had smooth dirt which was great to skate on, while other parts had huge drops and tree stumps all over the place which were a nightmare to try and navigate. Another wonderful surprise I found on the trail is that it must have been banana spider breeding season because those suckers were everywhere. I'm not kidding when I say every single time I'd stop to catch my breath, there was a banana spider web within 2 feet of me. I might have had to bust out my matrix moves a few times, but thankfully I didn't crash into a single web. Despite a few falls and almost becoming Spider-Man, I'd say day 5 was a complete success. And that is it for our week of off-road rollerblading. This activity is a little hard for me to rate difficulty-wise since I have years of experience with regular rollerblades, but overall, I'd give it 4 out of 5 stars, with the biggest challenge being first, knowing how to skate, and secondly, being able to hit bumps and recover, which happens all the time off-road. As I said on day 3, these skates can handle almost any terrain, but work best on certain types. With my experience, the ideal place to off-road skate is a smooth walking path or a wooded area with a decent number of hills. However, a slightly rocky terrain like in Moab could work too. The only places I wouldn't recommend off-road skating are places with a lot of sand and mud. Another useful thing to keep in mind when skating is to always have a slight bend in your knees and don't be afraid to jump up when you hit a bump or need to catch yourself. My parting words of advice are to always go out with at least wrist guards and knee pads and make sure your boot is tight enough so your foot doesn't wiggle around. If you're thinking of giving off-road rollerblading a shot, I will warn you they're significantly more expensive than regular rollerblades. The cheapest similar model I found was for a pair of Powerslide Off-Road Trinities for about $380, whereas my Powerslide Next Outback 150s go for $460. Check out the link below for my recommended helmet and pads I use while skating. Overall, I was very satisfied with the performance and comfort of the boots and only had one minor critique. On day 1, after tightening the top ankle strap, it got stuck in the clip, and the only way I was able to get it out was by prying against it with a flathead screwdriver. And when I say it was stuck, I mean if I didn't have that screwdriver handy, I'd still be trying to get him off. Alright guys, that is it for episode 4 of Week Slam with your host Sam. Don't forget to leave a comment below on what activity you want to see me try next. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share the video to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching and see you next week. But before you go, we're going to be spinning the viewer-suggested Wheel of Slams to find out next week's activity. And here we go. Okay, next week's activity is